All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to systematically dismantle some deeply ingrained cultural assumptions we all have about religion. And more importantly, we're going to equip you with a highly practical, text-based tool to help you determine objective truth for yourself. Seriously, if you've ever found yourself questioning inherited traditions or wondering why we do the things we do, you are absolutely in the right place.
Here is a quick look at our roadmap. We're going to start by looking beyond sectarian labels, then figure out who guidance is actually for, compare truth against inherited tradition, unpack the Furqan filter, and finally, test our daily rituals. Let's get into it.
So, do different religions actually have different holy books? I mean, it's a bold question, right? We almost universally assume the answer is just a flat yes. But this question challenges the very core of sectarian division. Because when we look closely, the internal text itself gives a surprisingly unsectarian answer, one that flips our standard worldview completely upside down. Let's start right at the foundation and look beyond these inherited sectarian labels. Think about the Torah. The sectarian assumption is that it's a sacred text exclusively owned by the Jewish religion. But what's truly fascinating is how the text itself completely ignores this concept of tribal ownership. The word Torah actually derives from a Hebrew root related to archery, literally hitting the target of truth about God. The text defines all Torah purely by its function, its instruction, its guidance, it is light. It belongs to anyone who actually upholds its justice, not just to a specific ethnic or religious sect that happens to perform inherited traditions. And moving on to the Injil, this one brilliantly illustrates a massive structural mismatch. The common assumption equates the Injil with the four canonical Gospels, the ones authored by Luke, Matthew, Paul, and John, decades after the fact. But the internal text, it defines El Injil as a singular, immediate revelation given directly to Jesus, Isa. It explicitly states that it confirmed the revelation that was physically present between his hands at that moment. So it's not some post-event biography compiled by later followers. It's direct, functional guidance. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The text simply does not view Revelation as a collection of competing books for competing teams. The Quran is presented as a functional recitation. It's part of a single, unbroken stream of guidance, and it explicitly confirms previous revelation. This whole idea of dividing into separate, walled-off religions, that is actually a human post-revelation construct that is completely absent from the original text's intent. Which leads us to a pretty big question. If these texts don't belong to specific religious sects, who exactly are they meant to guide? The text actually builds a brilliant two-layer system using two very specific phrases. First, you have Lil Nas, which means for mankind. This means the message is completely open and universally available to everyone, no restrictions. But then it uses Lil Muttaqin, meaning for the conscious. So while the text is open to all, it only activates as guidance for a specific type of conscious human being. The barrier isn't a lack of access. The barrier is our own internal resistance. So what actually makes someone conscious? Well, it has absolutely nothing to do with wearing the right religious labels. According to the text, taqwa, or consciousness, is defined by objective ethical and cognitive alignment. We're talking about truthfulness. We're talking about upholding universal justice. It means actively rejecting blind adherence to inherited cultural desires, which the text calls hawa. The text's effectiveness depends entirely on this ethical baseline, not on performing empty sectarian rituals. Now we really need to figure out how the text separates actual objective truth from the cultural habits we blindly inherit and mistakenly label as religion. This contrast is fundamental. On one side, we have al-haq, objective truth. It is real, it's deeply tied to justice, and it actively eliminates misguidance. On the exact opposite side, we have al-batil, which is falsehood. And falsehood isn't just a simple lie. It is anything constructed on blind assumption, which is zan, and cultural desire. Al-haq cannot be reduced to a set of sectarian rituals unless those rituals are demonstrably grounded in objective justice and reality. This brings us to a literal game changer, al-Furqan. Furqan literally means to separate or distinguish. It acts as the operational system. Think of it as both the external revealed criterion found in the text and the internal cognitive ability granted to conscious individuals to distinguish objective truth from constructed falsehood. It's not just a nice idea you read about, it's an operational tool you actually use. And the text pairs the sending down of the Furqan directly with a warning about those who cover the signs. Notice the wording here. It's not talking about innocent, passive ignorance. When you possess the Furqan, when you have the tool to recognize clear evidence, ignoring that evidence is no longer innocent. It becomes an active, knowing suppression of the truth just to protect a constructed reality.
Okay, so let's make this highly practical. Let's talk about the Furqan filter. How do we use this to test the traditions, the habits, and the rituals we practice every single day? We turn the concept into an actionable checklist. This transforms abstract theology into a tool that absolutely anyone can use right now. If a belief or practice is objective truth, it must pass these 5 questions. 1. Is it based on clear, verifiable evidence? 2. Is it completely free from blind assumption? 3. Does it uphold universal justice? 4. Is it consistently applied? And 5. Is it independent from tribal or cultural bias? By applying this filter, we start to see that humanity isn't actually divided by religious identity. We are divided into 2 completely different cognitive systems. System 1 covers the signs. It actively suppresses evidence to maintain comfortable traditional norms. Honestly, it's kind of like stubbornly supporting a miserable sports team just because your parents did. You actively ignore the losing record just to protect the tradition. System 2, however, engages the signs. It uses deep reasoning and reflection to process evidence and achieve actual cognitive certainty. So let's put this to the test with your own daily rituals. Let's take everything we've learned in this explainer and apply it directly, and maybe a little uncomfortably, to your own life. Here is your simple, actionable decision tree for separating verified guidance from unquestioned cultural baggage. Pick one deeply held ritual. Just one. Run it through the filter. Does it survive based on clear text and objective justice? Or does it only exist because your ancestors did it? Because when you actually run things through this filter, you might discover a pretty hard truth. A lot of practices, like specific inherited prayer postures, traditional dress codes, or dietary taboos that aren't actually established in the text, are sustained purely through cultural imitation rather than objective truth. They fail the test. They aren't inherently just, they're completely bound to group identity, and they rely entirely on blindly inherited assumptions rather than clear textual evidence. And honestly, that is the absolute beauty of this framework. You don't have to rely on blind faith anymore. You don't have to live with the anxiety of just guessing if your traditions are correct. You have a text-based, analytical tool for spiritual inquiry. Objective truth is quite literally designed to be tested, and it invites the scrutiny. So I'm going to leave you with this final, vital question as you continue your own journey toward objective truth. Take your absolute most cherished tradition and run it through the Furqan filter. Will it stand as al-haq, or will it fall away as al-batil? The choice to engage the signs or to cover them up is entirely yours.